Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Claire Timon, and I've very recently been acting as Executive Director for Future Everything, which is an organisation based in Manchester and works across the UK and internationally. I have been attempting to complete a PhD for the past 4 or 5 years. So I've actually taken the break to stop working at Future Everything to try and finish my research. So for the past 20 years, I've been working at the intersection of art, place, community, and social change. My practice started as an administrator many years ago for the Irwell Sculpture Trail, which was a sculpture trail that runs through Salford, Manchester into Lancashire. And it was amazing job opportunity at the start of my career. I have since worked as a community engagement manager for a large housing regeneration programme, curated gallery spaces, consulted and self-initiated projects, strategies, methodologies and tools to help bring people together to have conversations and co-design ideas around place. This image shows choreographer Ruth Jones performing on a derelict site where there was initially some large-scale housing that had been demolished as part of an artist residency programme called Scratch the Surface, quite a long time ago now. So why am I explaining my previous experience to you, and how is it relevant to today's topic? As part of my PhD research, I've recently undertook a mapping exercise, mapping the journey of my career, my projects, and to identify common themes and lines of inquiry throughout my 20-year practice. A couple of themes have emerged and interconnect throughout the relationships I've developed, the projects I'm most proud of, and the approach that I take, which occurs around the notion of connection. It's a reoccurring theme that keeps coming up. How to connect to what is already available, what's around, who is there, and where the opportunities lie. I'm also really passionate about empowering the local creative community as enablers to make change happen, which is why I'm really keen to tell you about a project that I initiated in Blackburn in 2012. Blackburn, for those of you who may not be aware, I'm sure you are, is a town situated in Lancashire. It's a post-industrial town and was named one of the crap towns in the infamous blog, which then turned into a book series, and was also classed as a clone town by the New Economic Foundation. So working with my now good friend and colleague Wayne Hemingway, who was originally from Blackburn, we took the idea of what Blackburn had, as I mentioned before, which was empty shops in prime locations, an open-minded council, underused evocative buildings, a strong industrial heritage and successful diaspora. To embrace these assets at the start to help transform the town, where people can come together to test their ideas, demonstrate their talents, and try and create life beyond 5 o'clock in the evening. There was no nighttime economy, no hotels, shops were starting to shut down. And so we created Blackburn is Open. Blackburn is Open was a campaign that was used to empower the local creative community to come forward with ideas. We created ways in which to celebrate the talent in Blackburn across other areas of the Northwest. So we created these magazines and actually distributed them to areas in Liverpool, Manchester and Preston to showcase the talent that was in the town. We set up an urban room. I could do a whole presentation on urban room. If you're not familiar, Google it, and there's an urban room network, which is basically a place where people can come together to discuss ideas around the built environment. So through this creative community campaign and various other initiatives, the town started to get some really good press coverage, and the identity and perception of the town really started to improve. So no longer was it a crap town or a clone town, but it was a town becoming known for its individuality and brilliant talent. A project that I'm particularly proud of is one called Maker Sheds, which is one I initiated and was launched at the National Festival of Making, another project that came out of the Blackburn is Open campaign. It was essentially a student competition for architecture students to develop ideas for makers to set up in the town, and these were the winning designs. A very recent project, I'm running out of time, that I've been involved in. So this was 2 years in the making, Future Everything. There's a whole case study on the Future Everything website. My colleague Chris is here today, where we engaged young people across 5 towns in Greater Manchester to develop an online placemaking tool. So I encourage you to go and have a look at that. It's called thisplaceofmine.com, I think, or co.uk. And then this is a recent project that I'm currently doing in my hometown of Glossop. So, and I've got 20 seconds left. I'm going to skip these. Yeah, I'll leave it there, but please get in touch if you want more information.
Okay, we'll go. Well, a big thanks to Jed for inviting me to take part in this fab event. I've been working within the realm of digital placemaking for 20 years as a designer, researcher, academic, and strategist. Roller coaster was mentioned by Ruth at the top of the show, and I think this is going to be a quick roller coaster now. So most recently, I've been working as part of the Calvium team, and Calvium, there we go, is a digital agency based in Bristol with a history and passion for creating digital products that help to foster deeper connections between people and places. And we have a diverse client base. The common threads that run through are creativity and innovation, underpinned by a strong co-design and collaborative ethos. And that is essential to successful digital placemaking, where you're working at the intersection of people, place, technology, and data. And for my session, we'll position digital placemaking as digital products or experiences that connect people to a particular location. Indeed, for years, people have been acting in and upon the world using digital technologies. Our familiar mobile devices, such as our smartphones and wearables, play an intrinsic part in how we understand and relate to physical places. And since the pandemic, our use of digital technology and critically, people's expectations of tech to enable new types of interactions and relationships with places has grown massively. And that calls upon us all here to embrace a creative and responsible approach to urban tech and to expand and reframe the fundamental ways that we think about public space and spatial practices. So we'll spend the next few minutes galloping through a number of projects that highlight the amazing variety of ways that people are already connecting with places enabled by tech. And if you don't already, I'm sure that by the end, you'll agree that we should be positioning digital placemaking as an essential part of achieving the place strategies of our towns, cities, and regions. And I've chosen 5 lenses through which we shall now explore. Here we go. Take a breath. Place activation. So Pokemon Go is a great example. It was launched in 2016 and it remains the most popular augmented reality app of all time, making our public spaces a playground. So by 2018, it had been downloaded over 800 million times worldwide. Also place activation and poles apart from Pokemon Go is the award-winning augmented reality theatrical adventure that takes place on the streets of London, and it's called The Lost Palace. It enables visitors to experience a heritage site that no longer exists, and through the use of the creative use of custom handheld objects, binaural 3D sound, haptic tech, GPS, and critically expert storytelling, The Lost Palace guides people around Whitehall to witness history in the making. Next, we have 2 completely different ways to support mobility. Firstly is Navsta. So if people are to participate fully in the rich texture of a city, they need to have the confidence and the ability to travel around it. And Navsta is a mobile wayfinding tool to support people with hidden disabilities to plan their journey through a railway station, to undertake the journey, and to manage uncertainty during a journey. The second mobility project is Starling Crossing, which is an interactive pedestrian crossing that responds dynamically in real time to make pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers safer and more aware of each other. And this means the markings, as you can see here, the markings on the ground change in response to the needs of the pedestrian. The public engagement lens shows us Ideascape. Calvium was commissioned, I love this project. We were commissioned to undertake an in-depth research project that identified ways in which digital placemaking can contribute to the social, cultural, and economic prosperity of a major 38-acre site, regen site in Cardiff Bay. And co-design and collaboration was at its heart. And the desire was to enhance the quality of life of all stakeholder communities. For, again, looking at public engagement, I now realize I should have chosen This Place Is Mine by Future Everything, but I went for block by block. This is a project that integrates the computer game Minecraft into public space planning to get community members more involved. And Minecraft helps the neighborhood residents to model their surroundings digitally, visualize possibilities, express their ideas, and accelerate the process, or the process and the progress of planning and urban design. Next is through the interaction lens, and I've chosen here my safety pin, which is a fab project, and it's a personal safety app that helps women to make safer decisions about their mobility based on the safety score of an area. And I've used it in terms of interaction, as it's around using crowdsourced data about a location. And then the next one is iNaturalist, which is a free online social network of people sharing biodiversity information about a place in order to help each other learn about nature. And again, it's based around interaction and crowdsourcing. And our final lens is cultural engagement, where we have the finalist for Platform of the Year, which is the Place Experience platform. It's a new digital placemaking product from Calvium, and it enables place managers to create unique location-specific stories, maps of a place, and to provide up-to-date information for visitors to enjoy when they're at the destination using their smartphone. And this project is called PopMaps. It connects people. We did it with City ID and Bristol City Council, and it connects people with the events and activities that are occurring in a city's streets, spaces, and venues. And it responds to a visitor's location and preferences. And it's all about the kind of the hyper-local mapping of a neighborhood. So I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation, and I hope that you'll agree with me that digital placemaking is critical for advancing sustainable urbanization and improving the quality of life for all. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Riley. I'm the founder and CEO of Spearhead Interactive Limited. We're an ideas and solutions business established in 2013, and we're based in the northeast of England. We specialize in digital transformation using interactive and immersive technologies. Huge thanks to Jed and to Ruth for inviting me to speak to you all today. It's really great to be here. So Jed posed a question to me for this Pecha Kucha, one which I hope that I can answer today. How can we use digital tools and technology to support the design and presentation of real-world spaces whilst ensuring three things? That people are at the heart of any digital transformation experience, that traditional content and mediums are included in the strategy, and that we create not just a return on investment, but a return on experience. So typically there are four main top-level channels that are used in the development and promotion of spaces. A physical brochure on a website is standard practice. However, there might be a dedicated project app, and for certain developments also maybe an on-site marketing suite. What would happen if we looked at the length and breadth of the technology landscape and applied the art of the possible to each of these to create a brand new strategy? Well, brochures would be revitalized, not simply a deck of required content that's ultimately destined for landfill, but an access point to a world of digital experiences that add value above and beyond the physical object. And people tend to think that this works one way, for example, using augmented or mixed reality to overlay virtual assets onto the brochure. However, this can also be flipped. So rather than using a device to control the content on the brochure, we can use printable electronics built into the brochure itself to control the device. So using conductive print techniques, a small battery and a Bluetooth microcontroller, you could link through to image galleries, videos, interactive content using the buttons on the brochure itself. Outside of using augmented reality, the apps typically operate and share a lot of the same features as the website. So what could we do differently? Well, perhaps a 360 video live stream of the site or a walk around of an interactive 3D site model. The core objective of the app is to provide a portable way to interact and engage with meaningful content. In contrast, the website's often the hub for the majority of projects, providing access to information, image galleries, perhaps an interactive sitemap and social media feeds. We could improve this by adding a page dedicated to the app and ensuring easy access, include the 360 video feed and promote the experiences that are available also in the marketing suite. For example, a plinth or an interactive table that users can interact with using the app, leveraging any AR functionality and providing both new experiences and the same experiences in new ways in order to promote the project. Repurposing the content is not only cost effective, but if executed right, it'll drive engagement and increase the value of any feedback that you get from visitors. Or perhaps we could optimize and utilize the 3D BIM model for the 3D tour and create a next generation VR experience for people to actually walk around. This would allow them to engage with the site and developments in real time with all the kinds of beneficial interaction and functionality that's added to highlight specific areas of the project and create meaningful experiences. So when designing and crafting a strategy to answer our question, it's important not to get lost in the technology, but ensure that the focus is on people and understanding the problem statement and the value of the proposed elements to different stakeholders. The 360 live stream is great to demonstrate progress for marketing, but it could also be useful for project planning and also for security teams. And one of the biggest issues involved around the promotion of spaces is around legacy and ensuring that campaigns and both physical and digital assets can be leveraged in short, medium, and long terms. We'd like to provide ongoing support and attention for the location whilst reducing the overall investment cost in any content as it's repurposed over time to provide more and more value as the project moves into different life cycles. So regardless of whether we're talking about PC, mobile, VR, AR, or any other medium, the key point is that we're using technology to augment and improve a particular process or processes. So how can a project grow strategically to improve places, and how can the proposed content investments be leveraged across the different stakeholders to provide that additional value? Well, we believe there are 5 core types of data we can leverage when moving visualization from 2D to 3D. The first being visual data. Being able to see and navigate a space, understand how it's going to look, how it's going to feel, potentially in different setups and configurations as well. These types of solutions are also perfect for project planning stages with local authorities, raising investment, or engaging commercial or residential buyers. The second stage is experiential data, where we bring the space to life and enable users to perform activities as they would in the real world. As well as building marketing and engagement tools, this is also great for any kind of training, perhaps used to teach maintenance procedures for properties or public domain assets. In contrast, functional data allows us to interact with processes in ways that we can't do in the real world. For example, making structure semi-transparent so as to visualize internal pipework and infrastructure, not just useful in planning or construction phases, but this also impacts on facilities management processes when construction is complete and the sites are also in operation. So thus far, we've leveraged content in order to simulate and replicate processes with no input from the actual space. However, if we add live data from sensors located around the environment, these can be fed back into the site, effectively creating a 3D monitoring system. This can then be used for any number of applications, identifying which buildings use the most power or receiving real-time alerts for faults in context. And taking this to its natural conclusion, different systems can be overlaid onto the software, interacting with the sensor information to trigger different manual and automated actions as a site control tool. This could be used to schedule and optimize routes for trash collection based on how full the proximity sensors in the bins are to minimize travel times and CO2 emissions. So what have we done and what benefits has it brought? Well, each of the 4 original channels have been augmented using new technologies to delight, inspire, and captivate audiences. And we've looked at alternative applications that will increase productivity and efficiency. In turn, this will ensure we're saving time and costs, and also enables differentiation from any similar projects and competitors. Interestingly, because returns are not just being made on the investment, but also on the emotional experience that's provided and the secondary or tertiary impacts to the process, many of the benefits can be difficult to calculate. Ultimately, by leveraging new technologies to turn mundane traditional tasks into compelling activities, you'll impact a range of metrics in a positive way for the company and the employee. So how can you use digital tools to improve a place? Well, first define the challenge, identify what you're trying to achieve and why it matters, understand the groups and stakeholders to identify technologies they're ready for, and analysis of the full scope of the project to prioritize elements and create a minimum viable product. Prototype wherever possible as well. So have we answered the initial question? Well, by taking an overview approach, we've been able to devise an integrated strategy that meets the brief, but by repurposing and tweaking content, we've created the foundations for solutions that are being executed across all areas of the project lifecycle, from conception to demolition, providing value to all stakeholders whilst ensuring not just an ROI, but also an ROX. Thank you very much for your time.
I've taken a slightly different kind of angle from the question that Jed posed. So I've got half a presentation, which is a little bit about some of the work I've done, and then half a presentation about some of the things that I've used my experiences on and with. So I have more of a physical regeneration background, but hopefully that'll become a little bit more obvious as we go through the slides. So this is me. My name's Dave Sharp. If you want to tweet me at any point, there's my Twitter. So this is where I grew up. It's a place called Yarm in the Tees Valley. You've probably never heard of it, but it has won Village of the Year, Town of the Year several times. I couldn't honestly tell you why, and certainly when I was growing up, the place was just a non-event. I always knew I was leaving, probably as a teenager. There was somewhere else I was going. Middlesbrough's the closest thing I've got to a hometown. It's in the northeast of England. It's about 10 miles from where I grew up. So that was always my anchor point as a teenager, as a kid growing up. Middlesbrough was the biggest, closest thing to where I lived, and kind of my first kind of real interaction with a large space or a large environment. But that didn't really hold anything for me, if I'm honest. So as I continued to grow up, I still didn't see Middlesbrough as an anchor. It wasn't a place I was going to commit to. So my first real step out into the real world came leaving home, starting my first job, moving to London. The words I associate now with London at that point in my life were really just, it was old and random, and it was really kind of diverse based on where I'd come from. And I spent a lot of time walking around the streets, not using the tube, which my co-workers at the time found bizarre. But I kind of actually wanted to stand out on the street and see and hear things and not just travel around underground. So I used the underground very little, really, and you spend a lot of time walking around above ground, just trying to have the most experience I could have while living in that environment. I then moved here. This is Austin in Texas. It's completely different at the other end of the spectrum. So if I had to apply words to Austin, I'd be looking at kind of, it's relatively new as a place. It's only 150 years old. It's not the thousands of years old that London is, but it's very manicured and very planned. It's very organized. It's quite green considering it's in a desert, but it's very well manicured. And it's very hot. It is in the middle of a desert. And arriving here, having come from London and then having previously come from a smaller place like Middlesbrough, I was kind of fascinated with the adherence to the design. So actually you can walk around Austin and find anything that you want by thinking it through. So like the DMV, the driving license place is actually next to the bus station, because if you need a driving license, you need to get there on the bus. So they've thought the whole thing through. It's very, very well prepared. And when you arrive, it's very structured and very easy as an environment to navigate. I then moved here. This is Irvine in California, Southern California. It's pretty much the last place you see, leaving LA and heading towards San Diego. It's pretty new as a place. It's actually only existed since 1971, when they amalgamated three other kind of residential areas together and called it Irvine. You can see there's a style to it. All the buildings look the same. It's very regular. It's very easy to navigate. Again, a bit like Texas, a bit like Austin. It's planned, manicured, organized. There's gardeners, there's tree people, there's, everything is there. But it's very residential. There's no business there. It's a commuter area essentially for southern LA. I then went from there to here. So I moved to New York. And went back more towards the kind of London feeling. So now, being in a large metropolitan area, you can always see the sky in California. It's hard to find the sky in New York. The buildings dominate, it's noisy, it's intense. It's very, very high tempo as an environment. But I used to live on Long Island and I would get the train to Manhattan every day. And I really realized there's a real extreme between the haves and the have-nots. If you live on Manhattan Island, and you live south of 110th Street, you're in the kind of have category. But my train used to go through Flatbush and Flushing, parts of Queens, Brooklyn, Coney Island, and those places are really quite deprived. So we have this environment of, a small part of the environment is very, very affluent. A large part of the environment is very definitely not. And it's the contrast is quite stark. As you move out of Manhattan and onto Brooklyn, it just goes from the have to the have not in a fraction of a second. And it's right there in kind of glorious technicolor for you to see. I then moved to Glasgow, which was a complete step change from pretty much everything. So I lived in Partick. It's one of the older areas of the city. Absolutely loved it. I always felt that Glasgow was a bit in its renaissance. So lots of new buildings going up, redevelopment of the waterfront. And some of the more historic areas were probably getting a little left behind. So beginning to get the kind of New Yorky kind of steel and glass in one area, old traditional buildings in another as kind of demarcation lines about where development was taking place. But generally enjoyed my time in Glasgow, and I still own a flat there. When I left, I didn't really want to sell my flat, so I hung on to it. And that brought me right back to Middlesbrough. So I'd kind of done a complete loop, London to Texas to California to New York to Scotland and back again. And that whole first part of my journey left me with a bunch of experiences and understanding of what it's like to be in different places and not be a native, not always understand everything that's in front of you, not always recognize everything that's around you. And I came back to Middlesbrough to effectively work on a regeneration project for Middlesbrough called Digital City. And that was a £40 million government-funded initiative to give Middlesbrough a bit of a digital kickstart. The intention there to try and create Middlesbrough's first digital cluster of companies. There wasn't much there when we started in 2003. About 86 companies existed by the end of 2008. So that's kind of where my regeneration workflow started. I now live in Durham. And Digitale feels like early stages of Digital City again. We've got some pretty good ideas and some plans to digify some of the things, some of the more interesting parts of Durham. And hopefully what comes out of the back of things like this symposium will kickstart that effort with the university and with the council and the BID and other partners. So I thought I'd give you a quick whiz around some of the more kind of placemaking things that I've been involved with. So I've done a number of regeneration projects in different places. I did some work in Bergen in Norway. It has a very historic, very northern nature to it. It's very in the middle of nowhere. It's ring-fenced by nature and not far off the Arctic Circle. There are a number of issues that Bergen faces. It's definitely a place for tourism, but not necessarily a place for industry. And trying to find ways of bringing digital to somewhere as far north as Bergen was a bit of a challenge, but I'm happy with the idea that what we've left behind from that project is there are now a cluster of digital projects running out of Bergen. And I did use some of the digital city experience from Middlesbrough to seed some of the activities in Bergen. This is Troy, which is in upstate New York. So it's a small town. It has a Yarm-like quality to it where I grew up. It's kind of had an identity, so it is the place where the phrase Uncle Sam generated. It used to feed the American Army through pork and beef, and those products had Uncle Sam printed on them, and that became a generic term for the US. So it's got some history, it's got some culture, but it is a small town, and its population generally drains into New York or Albany, which is the state capital. So the project there to bring the market back, we focused on maker spaces, and Troy now has a very large active makerspace community based around some kind of physical stuff that we created. This is Kokomo, which is in Indiana. It's just north of Indianapolis. This town, a bit like Middlesbrough, had a lot of overlap with what had happened with Middlesbrough. Traditional industries had moved away. They'd had a car factory. They'd had some small tech companies that had moved back into Indianapolis. But its roots were in farming. So in conjunction with Purdue University, we created an agri-tech kind of incubator. Most of the farms in and around Kokomo were happy to get involved, and that has become a real leaf spring for them now. They've kind of moved on from car making and small scale digital projects. They're now running very intensive and high tech agriculture incubation across the farming communities around Kokomo. So this is Cardiff in Wales. I've been involved with the Welsh Assembly and the Welsh Government for a number of years on various digital projects. The thing I would always highlight about Cardiff is the Cardiff Bay development. So they opted to develop a part of the environment which is not the city centre, which I always felt was, one, the right thing to do, and two, a brave thing to do. So Cardiff Bay is about a mile and a half away from the main centre of Cardiff. There are lots of lessons to be learned from the Cardiff experience, and I would encourage anybody that's involved in physical regeneration to take a long, hard look at Cardiff. But I've been involved in a lot of the incubation spaces that were developed to try and get small businesses and entrepreneurs running. And if you're interested in that, you should check out Tramsheds. Tramsheds is the latest and largest incubator that we've opened in Cardiff. So Belfast in Northern Ireland. I have a parent from Belfast. I know Belfast well from growing up. Different scenario with Belfast. After the Good Friday Agreement, they were free and able and capable of doing a lot more than they would have done prior to that. It's still very much a mixture of physical regeneration, digital regeneration. So the thing about Belfast is it does have a lot of unused physical spaces that are really right for regeneration. But if you treat buildings like hardware, you need software to go in it. So there's more of a push now to develop small businesses through incubators to then go and redevelop the spaces for them to occupy further down the line. This took us to Mong Kok, which is an area of Hong Kong. So I've been a visiting lecturer at one of the universities in Hong Kong for a while. And Mong Kok is probably simply one of my most favorite places on the planet. It's so intense. It's so compact. It's really intriguing to see how people use that space, misuse that space. And I'm never really sure that I understand what they would change about that space. But the nighttime market is just the epicenter of a lot of activity for a lot of Hong Kong inhabitants. And I still like to just stand in the middle of it all and watch what people are doing. It's very, very intriguing just to see how they navigate that space and what they do and what they don't do and what's new and what's faded away over time. So Arvika in Sweden. So again, I've got activities that I've run with the Swedish government that date back to 2006. Arvika was my favorite project for a number of reasons. It's in the far north of Sweden, a bit like Bergen in Norway. It's very cold. It's very difficult to get to. Most Swedes have heard of it, but most Swedes have never been there. And when I arrived in Arvika, because I do live in these places, I go and live in these places before I try and run anything. I always feel that you need to be as educated as you can about what these places are actually really like, rather than just read about it. So I lived in Arvika for a while. And in the end, we just thought we needed to raise awareness. There wasn't an activity, there wasn't a piece of physical regeneration we felt was really appropriate. So we created an event, a live music event. And in 2009, Depeche Mode played live in Arvika with 30,000 people arriving into a town that's, half that in population for a 3-day music event. It was transformational. The tourism rose, the awareness of Arvika rose, new businesses arrived. All sorts of things happened off the back of that music event. And it's one of the standout projects that I've kind of been involved with. So what am I moving on to now? So I'm about to start work in Ipswich in Suffolk. I guess the thing I would say that what I've learned over the time that I've been doing this is that most things you can't carry them around. You've really got to start from scratch each time. You've got to involve yourself with the local community. You've got to learn about what it's like to be in these places and how these people feel about the place that they live in. And that'll be the case with Ipswich. So I'm going to be spending some weeks down in Ipswich to kind of absorb myself into kind of what Ipswich is and does and how it works. Possibly there are things from my previous projects that will seed new activities in Ipswich, but equally likely that there isn't, and there'll have to be a new and deliberate attempt to come up with something to fuel further growth in Ipswich. So that's me, and I'm happy for you to tweet me if you've got any particular questions.